exposed. The haunted outpost in Afghanistan where 12 soldiers discovered a sinister truth. The wind howled like a banshee through the jagged mountains of Afghanistan. A lonely outpost dubbed Fort Lost, clinging to the edge of oblivion. 12 soldiers, armed and weary, prepared for nightfall, an hour when the world felt like it was inching towards some unseen horror. Among them, Sergeant Mike Patterson stood still, his heart heavy. A father of 2 back in Ohio, he sought the tiniest glow of connection through his phone, fingers trembling as they scrolled. Every message was a lifeline, every silence a deepening void as dusk rolled in. The sun swallowed the last beams of light, casting long, ghastly shadows across the rugged terrain. The soldiers shuffled through their duties, each creak of equipment resonating like a foreboding omen. Tension nestled in their skin, a gnawing anxiety whispering of stories shared by villagers, tales of spirits and curses, wooing their sanity into the realm of paranoia. None dared to fully voice the dread clawing at them. Laughter felt fragile, and the air thickened with unspoken fears. On this fateful night, it escalated. Private Anderson, fresh from training and ridden with jitters, froze at the edge of the encampment. Strange whispers slipped through the swirling wind, taunting him like a siren's song. He fought against the fatigue pressing down on his eyelids. Yet the haunting words slipped through his resolve, and sleep fell away like a discarded cloak. Alone, gasping, he staggered back to his brothers, aware his heart would beat louder than ever. "Did you hear that?" he croaked, eyes wide as a deer in headlights. The others exchanged glances, unnerved, but brushed it off as exhaustion. That night, amid the pockmarked walls of the outpost, they wrestled with sleep riddled with nightmares of their own making. Whispers echoed in the dark, shadowy faces danced beyond flickering candlelight, mocking them from the void. Days passed, and unease morphed into creeping dread. Gear vanished without a trace. Shadows crept closer. Each motion felt calculated, every sound an invasion. Panic-born horrors crested like waves as clamorous screams echoed through the barracks. "Someone's here," shouted Corporal Marks, chest heaving. But as they turned, only silence filled the space, thick enough to slice with a knife. The breaking point came when they unearthed an old, leather-bound diary buried beneath the crumbling remains of the outpost's wall. Pages yellowed, words scrawled in desperate ink, recounted tales of soldiers plagued by the same darkness. Figures in the night it watches they cried, raving mad until the end, forever etched in despair. Their vanished brothers had been claimed by something unfathomable. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The men felt the tension snap. Friendships grew brittle like dry twigs. Mike's hands shook as he attempted to tether their fraying bonds. But despair boiled over when he spotted Private Anderson's vacant gaze, now haunted by unseen horrors. Night fell once more, drenching them in an oppressive silence, a pit that gnawed at their sanity. More whispers swelled outside, an unnatural symphony that gripped their throats. The wind roared, echoing like a warning call from the shadows. Mike stepped outside for a quick breath, seeking clarity under the starry canvas, only to feel darkness press upon him. Heart racing, adrenaline roaring. He heard a blood-curdling scream fill the air, pulling him back into the compound. "It's here and it knows us." The voice tore through the silence, crashing into Mike's mind like glass. They rushed in, but horror struck as they found no trace of their comrade, only a chilling note scrawled on the wall. "Trust no one." The flickering lights barely illuminated the dread pooling amongst them as Mike's thoughts spiraled into darkness. Would they survive till dawn? Or had they awakened something far worse? The cabin felt smaller with each passing moment. Shadows morphed, twisting into grotesque shapes that loomed larger in the corners of their minds. Mike's breath quickened as he stared unblinking at the chilling message. "Trust no one." The words seemed to shift and wriggle, a living horror embedded in the compound's battered stone. "Where's Anderson?" whispered Private Smith, his voice trembling like brittle leaves. The flickering lights made their faces look drained, ghastly. Mike's throat constricted. He was right here. It has to be. He couldn't finish, fear choking him. The group fell into an uneasy silence, eyes scanning the dark corners, each crackle of the dying light a reminder that they were not alone. Moments dragged into eternity, each tick of the clock echoing louder than the last. The wind outside shrieked, as if it were part of a chorus conspiring against them. "Let us split up," Corporal Mark suggested, though his voice faltered. "We need to find him." "No," Mike shot back, panic firing through him. "If we split up, well," just the words hung unspoken, a threatening whisper in the gloom. But hesitation won. Each soldier, a reluctant pawn, began checking rooms, faces drawn and sickly pale. The halls of the outpost, once buzzing with camaraderie, felt hollow and hostile. Every corner turned seemed pregnant with dread. Mike's heart raced as he pushed down the urge to scream. He rifled through Anderson's barracks, searching frantically. The small space looked untouched, a sign of normalcy. But the plastic chair sat at an odd angle, the bed unmade, sheets crumpled in a disheveled heap. And then he saw Anderson's notebook, lying open on the desk. Flipping it open, Mike's breath hitched. The pages were filled with frantic scrawls about the dark whispers, the figures moving in the night. "They're coming for me," one line read, underlined multiple times. He swallowed hard, feeling like he was choking on the very idea of losing another brother. "Mike!" It was Smith bursting into the room. "I think I saw something outside." Panic coursed through him as he joined the others on the compound's edge, adrenaline thrumming in time with his pounding heart. They clutched their rifles close, peering into the murky shadows melting into the moonlight. Suddenly, a startup engine roared to life. "What the hell?" Mike exclaimed, turning toward the sound. The heavy, rumbling noise vibed through the ground, and with it, a sense of impending doom settled like stones in their stomachs. Lights flashed in the distance, illuminating a section of the neighboring wasteland for a fleeting moment, revealing figures shadowed in ragged cloaks. They danced around something writhing on the ground. Ignoring their instincts, the soldiers crept closer, hearts in their throats, driven by a morbid curiosity. As they drew near, the strange figures melted away into the dark, leaving only a single, small object glistening faintly under the moonlight. Mike inched closer, instinct urging him forward. Suddenly, a distant scream shattered the silence. A voice he recognized. It was Anderson. "Get back. We need to go," Mike shouted, but it felt too late. The shadows shifted again, encircling the outpost, curling around their feet. Whispers ignited. "It's watching, it's here." Panic flooded the soldiers. "What do we do?" Smith implored. "We fight," Mike asserted, but uncertainty gnawed at him. As they braced for an attack, another scream shattered the air, more urgent, more terrifying. "What if it's not just us?" someone murmured in a breathless whisper. The ground trembled as the earth seemed to shift beneath them, and from the shadows came a figure, a silhouette of despair, drawing closer yet only an illusion. The men grasped their weapons tightly, hearts racing, ready for the unimaginable to occur as the darkness converged. Mike's gaze settled on the shadows, the very essence of fear approaching. What else were they hiding? He shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. But it was too late to ponder answers. They had awakened a horror that would not be contained. And in the twilight, something shifted, something tasting of blood and madness lurking just out of sight. What lay ahead was unknowable, but was the end coming, or a far worse beginning? The air wrapped around them like a shroud, thick with tension. The darkness brooded, whispering evil promises. Mike felt a tremor snake through him as he instinctively checked the bolts on his rifle. The others mirrored his movements, fingers fidgeting, breaths quickening. "What was that?" Smith squeaked, voice rising in pitch, betraying the fright buried deep inside. The shimmering object in the middle of the wasteland caught Mike's eye. What could it be? A trap? Some cursed item luring them closer? We have to leave, he repeated, his heart hammering relentlessly. The others hesitated, as if entranced. Shapes flitted to and fro like moths, dancing in the lease of moonlight only to recede into blackness. A haunting laughter resonated through the night, gleeful, erratic. The hairs on Mike's neck stood straight, and he could feel the pulse of his own fear thrumming in his ears, drowning out the echoes of their unity. Without warning, the ground beneath them erupted in a cacophony of shrieks and agonies. Shadows seemed to materialize into thrumming darkness, reaching out like grasping hands, yearning to pull them into the void. Mike's instincts screamed at him. Run! He barked, but the word felt heavy and futile as he turned to grab Smith by the arm. But Smith had already taken that first fading step back. His wide eyes fixated on the glint in the distance, and then it all happened at once. A deafening roar erupted, as if the earth itself fractured in their midst. The silhouette emerged fully, its form broad and grotesque, stretching toward the sky. It wasn't human, not even close. The features melded into one another, a blending of suffering that gushed dread. Eyes like burning coals, mouth a gaping maw of despair. What is that? Private Harris stuttered, voice barely a whisper. That IT lunged forward with unnatural speed. Time seemed to slow, each heartbeat echoing louder than the last. An urgent sense of desperation filled the air, pushing each soldier to move despite their terror. Mike yanked at Smith, pulling him back. Leave it, Mike screamed, dragging Smith away from the cursed light. We need to find the others. But in his mind, a dreadful fear settled. What if the others were already gone? The forest loomed around them, branches like skeletal fingers clawing at the sky. They sprinted through the underbrush, heartbeats woven into the rhythm of their shared panic. Hushed whispers swirled around them, non-words formed by the trees. Shadows darted from trunk to trunk, eyes lurking just out of sight. Mike, what is happening? Smith gasped, stumbling over roots. I don't know, Mike shouted back, the adrenaline clogging his throat. Just stay close. The unseen presence felt palpable, a shadowy fog evolving into something tangible. Mike could feel it encroaching, wrapping tightly around his consciousness, trying to seep into the cracks of his reason. Then they spotted it, a faint light from the main cabin. Relief coursed through Mike, but it felt premature. The area hummed with tension, as if what lay inside was far worse than whatever escaped into the night. They hurried toward the door, barely making a sound. Open it, Smith begged, shaking with exhaustion and fear. Mike reached for the handle, breath held, but the door swung open into darkness, revealing a chaotic scene. Twisted furniture lay strewn across the floor, furniture blocking entrances, windows shattered, and blood splattered on the walls like morbid canvas art. A figure stood in the corner of the room, shrouded in darkness, trembling, wrapping its arms around itself like a child caught in a nightmare. It looked up with agonizing familiarity. Get away, Mike shouted, stepping into the room, ready to confront whatever horror awaited. Yet a familiar voice chimed from the figure. Help me, it was Anderson. His eyes wide with terror, and something else, a taste of dread, pooled in Mike's gut as realization set in. What had they let in? The shadows began to congeal again around them, as if the darkness itself was alive, waiting hungry for a feast. Get back, he yelled again, but the sound of approaching footsteps echoed, and in their quaking hearts, they felt the weight of judgment, a final reckoning for their bravery and guilt. The door slammed shut behind them, a heavy finality resounding in the silence. What more would they awaken in the dark? Would anyone make it out alive when dawn broke? Or was it already too late? The atmosphere inside the cabin thickened, pulsating with dread. Mike's heart raced as he struggled to process the grotesque reality around him. The shadow of Anderson trembled, guilt and fear oozing from his very essence, casting an unsettling glow in the corner of the room. The darkness seemed alive, swirling like a predator, teasing the edges of their sanity. Mike, I'm so scared, Smith whispered, his voice quaking. Get a hold of yourself, Mike snapped, knowing desperation had a way of spreading like disease. Still, His own heart trembled, unsettled by the terror radiating off Anderson. What happened to you? Anderson's gaze flickered, haunted memories slicing through his eyes. I was drawn to it, he stammered, his voice trembling as he gestured towards the corner where the darkness felt thickest. The light, it promised safety. Safety? Harris interrupted, his tone sharp with disbelief. That thing out there nearly killed us. You're telling me it wasn't supposed to be like this? Anderson cried, shivering. It lured me in like it's luring all of you. A choked sob twisted in his throat. I felt it inside me. It whispered things, terrible things. Mike's stomach turned. His rifle felt like a stone in his hands. What had they walked into? He turned to Smith, who was staring wide-eyed at Anderson. We need to get out, he urged, urgency flooding his voice. Whatever is here, it's tied to him. We don't know what it wants. But as they moved toward the door, an audible creak echoed in the room. The shadows thickened, writhing like angry serpents. A wicked laughter danced in the air, taunting, mocking their fear. Their escape was blocked like a cruel jest, a tether pulling them closer to a fate they couldn't grasp. Get down, Mike shouted, and instinctively, they all dove to the floor as a shadow lashed out, claws extended. The creature was more than an illusion, it had substance, its form shifting and boiling with malignant intent. The moment they hit the ground, the floor beneath them seemed to ripple, as if the very building was shifting. From beneath the floorboards, whispers poured forth, growing louder, more insistent. They gnawed at the edges of Mike's mind. He clenched his teeth, focusing through the cacophony that threatened to drown him. Anderson cried out, "Help! It's coming for me. It wants me." His hands grasped his head as if to crush the torment away. A chill rippled through the room when Mike caught a glimpse of it, the figure of a soldier, twisted and in pain. Faces of the fallen, eyes hollow, lining the walls, each expression pleading for release from the darkness that claimed them. Their suffering reached into Mike's core, a reminder of mortality and dread. "No!" he shouted, scrambling backward as the darkness lunged again, this time capturing Harris' leg. The soldier screamed, thrashing as the shadow began to envelop him. "Don't look! Don't engage with it!" Mike screamed, adrenaline overwhelming him as he pulled at Smith. They were on the threshold of a nightmarish descent into hell, and he could feel its grip tightening around their souls. With a final flick of its claw, the darkness tore Harris away, dragging him into the void with a bone-chilling shriek that echoed through the cabin, drowning out even the whispers. A silence followed as they stared at the spot where he'd just been, disbelief painted on their faces. "Now what?" Smith breathed, glued in place as the enormity of their loss sank in. Suddenly, the shadows twisted again, pulsing as if in response to their despair. More laughter erupted, filling the room with an evil chorus, a sadistic promise of what was to come. Trembling, Mike backed towards Anderson, realizing the grim truth. They were no longer merely fighting for survival. They were entangled in something so much darker than they could ever comprehend. "Find a way out," Mike urged. "We need to break this hold." But as the words left his lips, the shadows surged forward, eager, hungry, and then, amid the chaos, a gleam caught Mike's eye, something sticking out from underneath the debris. A glimmer of metal, promising salvation or further doom. What lay beneath the wreckage? Would it be their escape, or would it bind them tighter to the horrors that prowled the dark? Desperation clawed at Mike's throat as he hesitated. The gleaming object beneath the debris called to him, a siren's song woven into the fabric of fear and hope. Heart pounding, he forced himself to crawl closer. The shadows swirled, thickening around him like a suffocating blanket. He reached down, fingers grasping cold metal, unsure if he would pluck salvation from the dark or a deeper curse. With a wrenching pull, he freed a rusted dagger, ancient and pitted, its blade glinting dully under the flickering light. Where had it come from? A chill ran through him as he remembered the hollow faces on the wall, voices of the forsaken, whispering secrets in his mind. "Mike, what is that?" Smith's voice trembled, breaking Mike from his thoughts. "It looks dangerous. It might help us." Mike shot back, gripping the hilt. But the weight of it felt different, heavy not just with age, but like the sorrow of all who had succumbed to this malevolence. We need to fight back. The shadows writhed with renewed fury, their laughter cascading like a sickening tide. Mike could feel their rage, the air growing colder as if the darkness itself recoiled at the sight of the weapon. Anderson, still crumpled on the floor, glanced at Mike, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and something else, maybe recognition. "Keep it away from me," he shouted, backpedaling. "You don't understand what that is." "What do you mean?" Smith asked, eyes darting from Anderson to Mike, confusion swirling amid their horror. "It's cursed," Anderson choked out. "It holds the essence of those who perished here. You wield that thing and you'll invite their rage. Then what do we do? Stand still and let that thing eat us alive?" Mike shot back, desperation boiling in his voice. He brandished the dagger as if it were a shield against the encroaching terror. Anderson's gaze flickered to the corner where the shadows roared and howled, still clawing at the edges of their sanity. "We have to confront it, find its source. But do it without the dagger. Are you insane?" Smith gasped, his hands gripping Mike's arm, panic surfacing on his face. "How do we know that thing won't just it's the only chance we have?" Mike snapped, preparing to charge toward the darkness. He could almost feel its breath on his neck, the cold tendrils creeping closer, smelling their fear. "Wait," Smith shouted, but it was too late. Heart pounding, Mike surged forward, dagger raised, determined to end the torment as he crossed the threshold to the dark corner. A violent wind slammed into him, driving him backward. The shadows roared, a cacophony of anguished souls echoing through the cabin. The walls shivered, breathing in the darkness between them. The laughter transformed, morphing into voices, identifiable voices. Harris scream, taunting him, mixing with the cries of the fallen. "Mike!" Smith yelled. "Get back!" But the darkness enveloped him, curling around his limbs like the tendrils of nightmare, dragging him into their midst. A vision flashed before his eyes. Flashes of memories, laughter shared with friends, the inevitability of loss. Rage and fear swelled in Micah's chest, and he focused on what kept him anchored: survival. With every ounce of strength, he thrust the dagger into the shadow. A blinding pulse erupted. The darkness shuddered, releasing its grip momentarily, revealing a form trapped at its core. A figure, a soldier, one of the fallen, with eyes that demanded justice. Shocked, Mike stumbled back, the dagger slipping from his hand. "What the hell is this?" he gasped, staring at the tortured spirit. But just as hope flickered, the darkness lunged again, fiercer than ever, and Mike knew they hadn't won. "The only way out," the soldier's voice echoed, desperate and agonizing, "is to face the truth." Truth? The word hung heavy in the air, sinking in, filling Mike with dread. What truth? A realization gripped him, chilling him to the bone. Where was the line between salvation and damnation? Smith screamed as a shadow swept around him, dragging him toward the abyss. Determination burned within Mike as he rallied himself. "We can't give in. We'll find a way." But would the truth free them or finish what the darkness had started? As the shadows crept closer, Mike grasped a flicker of resolve. Escape was within reach, but the truth awaited, lurking just beyond the pulses of terror. What had to be faced before they could leave? What would be revealed in the heart of madness? Mike's mind raced, a whirlwind of adrenaline and fear. The soldier's eyes bore into him, filled with the weight of anguish and a plea for justice. "Face the truth," whispered the spirit, its voice weaving through the oppressive darkness, drawing Mike's gaze back toward the swirling shadows. "Get him out," Anderson cried, scrambling to his feet, adrenaline flooding his voice. But Mike remained frozen, caught between the pulsing shadow and the anguished gaze of the soul imprisoned within it. "Mike!" Smith yelled again, a painful desperation suffusing his tone. The shadows twisted around him like angry vipers, pulling him deeper into despair. The whispers swelled, rising to a crescendo, and all Mike could hear were the fears of the fallen, the vengeful wails of the past intermingling with the echoes of his own heartbeat. The dagger lay discarded on the ground, its promise of power now feeling like a double-edged sword. Could it truly help them, or was it a trap? A flicker of doubt unfurled in Mike's mind. What truth? He shouted into the darkness, his voice tinged with defiance. What do you want from us? The soldier's eyes widened, a flicker of recognition blooming there. Your fear feeds them. You must confront what you've hidden away, only then can we be free. Mike's heart sank as clarity washed over him. The truth was not just about the shadows, but the guilt and pain that lingered in their hearts. The secrets they had long buried in the chaos of war. Let go of your fear, the soldier urged, and for the first time Mike sensed a shift in the air. The shadows flickered, momentarily losing their grips on the living. A whisper of uncertainty cutting through their malevolent energy. Let him go, Anderson screamed, lurching toward Smith, who was now writhing under the heavy embrace of the dark mass. The shadows hissed in protest, spiraling tighter around Smith as his eyes widened with panic. Please, he begged, clawing at the air that felt thick as molasses. Smith, Mike shouted, his voice breaking. Hope and terror collided within him, but he couldn't let Smith be lost to this darkness. We have to face it. Together. Face what? Smith's voice cracked, a hint of disbelief cutting through his fear. You think admitting our mistakes will save us? It's too late. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. The shadows temporarily halted, as if weighing the words. Mike felt a pulse of energy surround him, igniting something deep within. No, it's not too late. We're not defined by our mistakes. We can fight back together. The spirits clamored for his attention, but Mike focused on Smith. You're stronger than this. Remember our training. You taught me that facing fear is the first step to conquering it. In that instant, a flicker of acknowledgement passed over Smith's features. The cracks in his resolve began to widen. I can't stop holding on to the guilt, Mike yelled, feeling the weight of time slipping away. You're better than that. We face it or we lose. The shadows shrieked in frustration, echoing around the room as Mike and Anderson took a step closer to Smith, their unity solidifying into an invisible wall against the encroaching dark. The energy shifted again, shadows flickering, exposing fleeting glimpses of faces from the fallen. I am not my failure, Smith shouted, newfound courage erupting within him. He squared his shoulders, raising his chin. I will fight. In that moment, the shadows recoiled, whispers turning into a furious howl. The soldier within the darkness drew closer, eyes gleaming with something resembling hope. This beginning, face the truth. But just as they felt the shadows start to wane, a blinding flash surged through the room. The vision rippled, as if trying to break through the layers of anguish. Panic surged as Mike held onto Smith and Anderson. Hold on, he shouted against the cacophony. But the light began to flicker, their surroundings dissolving and the darkness roared in fury. What awaited them as they confronted their truths? What horrors could emerge when memories surfaced? The shadows tightened their grip and the real fight was just beginning. The darkness swallowed them whole, the blinding flash turning into a haunting void. Shadows twisted and contorted, circling like a storm. Mike's heart pounded, every beat echoing like a war drum in his ears. The air felt electric, charged with terror. Where are we? Smith gasped, his voice trembling. What just happened? It's not over. Anderson's voice broke through the swirling chaos. A lifeboat in a raging sea. We need to hold on to each other. Cold sweat dripped down Mike's back. He struggled to keep his grip, fighting the urge to succumb to the panic clawing at him. The flashes of light shimmered, revealing glimpses of past horrors. Faces twisted in anguish, shadows trying to pull them down into despair. Focus, Mike shouted, scanning their surroundings. They stood in a barren field, littered with faded memories debris, like pieces of shattered glass reflecting a dark narrative. Keep your minds clear. Hollow whispers slithered between them, taunting in a language they felt but couldn't decipher secrets, regret, and the memories of those they had lost. You'll never escape face the truth, they crooned, their voices weaving through the shadows like shadows themselves. A shudder ran through Mike as tempests of memories assaulted them. He could see himself in combat, the horrors of warfare painting the scene in vivid detail. The screams, the shots, he struggled to breathe. This was it, the truth unveiled, but it hurt. It clawed at the edges of his mind, forcing him to relive moments he wanted buried forever. "What is this?" he whispered, fear creeping in. "Are we trapped in hell?" "Don't give in," Anderson yelled, his voice rising above the cacophony. "We have to break the cycle, focus on the living." "But how?" Smith cried, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. "What are we supposed to do?" "Confront it," Mike urged, eyes blazing with determination. "All of it. No more hiding. We have to admit our faults if we want to move forward." The soldiers began to tremble, but Mike pressed on. "I've lost men I didn't pull back when I should have. I let them down. I have to accept that if I want to move on." With every confession, the shadows screeched in hatred, writhing as if each admission of guilt burned them. "That's it. Let go of your fear," the soldier's voice echoed, urging them, pushing them. Smith clenched his fists. "I left my brothers behind, I couldn't save them. It's my fault." His voice, a raw edge of grief, pierced through the suffocating darkness, igniting a ripple of energy that pushed back the shadows. Anderson stepped forward, the weight of his own guilt settling like concrete in his soul. "I chose to fight, I should have run. I watched so many die." As the last words erupted from their lips, the air crackled with a raw intensity. The shadows recoiled, whispering frantically as that sacred light glimmered once more, pushing through the veil. "Together," Mike shouted, determination fueling him. The trio stood shoulder to shoulder, unwavering against the fury of the shadows. The light surged, an undeniable force, consuming the remnants of darkness, bringing clarity. Time felt distorted. Each second stretched, pulsing with urgency. The moment felt destined, as if they were on the precipice of salvation. But before they could grasp that fleeting hope, the darkness roared back in one explosive wave. The ground shook, shadows clawing at them like desperate hands. "Fight it! Don't let go!" Mike screamed as the malevolent force pushed closer, the whispers morphing into a deafening cacophony of despair. Their united front seemed to falter. For a heartbeat, he feared it was hopeless. But then, he caught a glint of possible freedom in the soldier's eyes. A promise of something greater. "Keep fighting. We are still alive," Mike declared, his voice fierce, but uncertainty seeped into his bones. What lay ahead? Was freedom truly within reach, or were they merely pawns in a deadly game? The howling darkness roared in defiance. And one thing became clear: their fight was only just beginning. The ground trembled beneath them, a seething beast hungry for their despair. The shadows twisted tighter, draping over their bodies like a suffocating blanket, each breath becoming a battle against the choking gloom. Mike's heart raced as the whispers intensified, louder than before, a desperate chant binding their thoughts. "Let them drown." The voices echoed, liquid darkness seeping into their minds. "You're unworthy, unforgiven, what is happening?" Smith shouted, eyes wild with fear. "Are we going to die here?" "Shut up," Anderson barked back, panic threatening to break his stoic facade. "We have to stay together." The energy in the air shifted, a charged fever, swirling around them. Mike squeezed his eyes shut, fighting back tears. "Focus. We've come this far. We know what we need to do. Tell it to go to hell." Smith spat, his fists shaking with anger. The bravado felt flimsy, but it was all they had. Despite the shadow's cloying grasp, the air grew heavier with the weight of their confessions, making them feel both exposed and alive. Each revelation formed a fragile barrier against the tide of despair. Mike clenched his jaw, forcing the memories back, facing the ghosts of his past. The faces he hadn't saved, the blood on his hands. "I should have listened," he suddenly blurted out, his voice breaking. "I ignored the warning signs. I didn't his breath hitched. I didn't protect my men." The shadows wailed, a cacophony of fury that ricocheted off the barren landscape. It felt like they were being pulled in all directions, but Mike forced himself to stay grounded. "We can't let it win." Anderson stepped forward, face pale but determined. I watched my brother die. He confessed bitterly, his voice rising above the tumult. I didn't even try to save him. I was too scared. Me too. Smith shrieked, the sound raw and piercing. I froze when the order came. They had my back and I let them down. With every confession, the shadows flickered, oscillating between rage and something resembling fear. A shimmering light flared within each soldier. Mike felt adrenaline surge through his veins, a connection binding them together, diminishing the encroaching darkness. Keep it coming, he urged, mixing credence with hope. Face your demons. We can do this. The energy crackled intensely. Face it, Mike cried. We owe it to them, we owe it to ourselves. And then, with a reluctant shuddering, the shadows began to pull away, just a fraction. But it was enough. The cries of anguish transformed into desperate, frenzied whispers filled with uncertainty. The soldiers pressed forward, emboldened. I lost my cool, Mike shouted. I was supposed to be the leader and all I did was put them in harm's way. Hold on to that rage, Anderson yelled, his voice a rallying cry. Use it. The connection thrummed, binding their voices together in a desperate symphony against the darkness. Each soldier screamed their truth, raw and unfiltered, sending ripples of light cascading outward. But just as victory loomed on the horizon, the shadows writhed, surging forth like a tide rising to crush everything in its path. A shriek, piercing and unholy, erupted as the darkness wreaked havoc, mocking their attempts to rise above. The ground began to quake violently, threatening to swallow them whole again. Don't you dare give up, Mike yelled, feeling the dread coil tightly around his chest. They were slipping, losing their grip on reality once more. Remember why we're here. A shadow lunged forward, and Mike caught a glimpse of a familiar face one lost long ago, its eyes hollow, a mirror reflecting his deepest regrets. No, he screamed, backing away. Get away from me. But the shadow flickered, shifting between the memories of his past. The truth stung sharply. What if they were truly beyond redemption? What if the darkness never left? Just then, a blinding flash erupted, scattering the shadows like ashes before the wind. For a brief moment, Mike glimpsed what lay ahead, a path shrouded in mist, but the darkness clawed back with renewed force, dragging them back into the void. What if we have to choose? Anderson gasped, eyes wide as he fought the terror encroaching again. Are we left with a choice? The shadows surged, rage boiling over, enveloping them in its hungry grasp once more. Fear gnawed at the edges of their resolve as Mike shouted back at the chaos swirling around them. But doubt seeped in. What if confronting the truth meant confronting the worst version of themselves? And what if this game had only just begun? The darkness howled, a tempest of despair swirling like a storm against their feeble light. It slammed into Mike and his comrades, shoving them back as though the very ground wanted to swallow them whole. A moan escaped from Smith's lips, a sound of raw terror that rattled through the air. Mike stumbled, trying to regain his footing, but the earth felt alive beneath him, shaking, hungry, twisting like 1,000 writhing worms. Together, Anderson shouted, gripping Mike's shoulder hard enough to leave bruises. They had to lean on each other now. There was no room for doubt, no room for fear. He could feel the ice creeping through his veins again, a familiar chill that whispered of surrender. But he wouldn't let it win. Look at me, Mike shouted back, forcing the frantic glimmer of fear from his eyes. Whatever those things are, they feed off our fear. We've got to focus. Easier said than done. Smith cried as a shadow darted past him, stretching impossibly long before vanishing again into the veil of black. It slithered near, the air thickening with its presence. It was hungry and waiting, and somewhere in the shadows lurked their deepest fears. I lost them. Smith's voice cracked, vulnerability spilling from him like blood from a wound. I shouldn't have been there. I can't do this. Mike felt the weight of despair pinning him down, but he knew they had to push through. You're not alone, he yelled, pulling Smith closer. The fog grew denser, swirling in frenzied patterns as memories materialized, each more painful than the last. Faces etched in regret appeared, the sacrifices they couldn't save, the ones they had failed. Remember your promises. Anderson's voice rose above the chaos. Those men breathed their last because of us. This is our chance to confront it. Don't give in. But the shadows wouldn't give up, not easily. They slithered closer, emitting a chill that sunk deep into their bones. Mike pressed his back against Anderson's, feeling the tremor of collective dread. Panic surged within him, but he clung to a sliver of hope, fragile as glass. "Join me," he shouted, rallying them. "Shout it out. What are you most afraid of?" "Losing," Anderson bellowed, his voice cracking under the weight of it all. "Losing everything I care about." A rush of confidence filled Mike. It was the catharsis they needed. One by one, the soldiers started to scream their most haunting fears, their pain pouring out like molten lava. Each confession ignited a spark. Each revelation pushed back the shadows just a little more. "I couldn't save them," Smith yelled, eyes wide with terror as he fought the suffocating grip of despair. "I traded their lives for my own." "Enough," Mike screamed, the fervor building like a storm. "Let it out. Don't let them twist you." Suddenly, a vicious roar erupted from the darkness, rattling the leaves in a cruel mockery of their hope. The ground trembled violently, an earthquake of shadows consuming everything in its path. The blinding light Mike had seen earlier flickered, struggling against the tide of malevolence threatening to pull them back. "Confront it," Anderson shouted, eyes wild, seeming to explode with unexpected strength. "We'll break the cycle if we band together. We don't have to carry this anymore." But as they pushed against the shadows, another wave crashed over them, darker and more chaotic than before. The figures shifted, taking on grotesque forms, the faces of lost comrades distorted into screams of anguish. The wind carried their desperate whispers, chilling Mike to the bone. "Choose," the voice boomed, deep and resonant, echoing off the trees. "What will you sacrifice?" Time seemed to stop, a grim silence hanging in the air, punctuated only by the pulsating dread building within them. They had to decide. Would they face their fears and leap into the unknown, or would they cling to their despair and remain prisoners of the darkness? Mike's heart raced as the shadows pressed closer. They were running out of time. "Choose," the voice echoed again, more menacing, a predator reveling in the chase. What would they surrender to? Escape this monstrous nightmare? The answer lay just beyond their grasp. The air was electric with tension as Mike, Anderson, and Smith stood amid the chaos. They had fought so hard to confront their fears, but the shadows loomed heavier, a menacing tide ready to sweep them back into despair. Time felt slippery, seconds melting away under the weight of their choices. "Are we really going to give in?" Mike shouted against the oppressive darkness. "No, we've come too far." Anderson gripped his shoulder, a fierce determination igniting in his gaze. "We need to think about what we'll sacrifice. What are we each willing to let go of to save ourselves?" "Light," Smith cried, a flicker of realization blooming amidst his despair. "The light. If we confront the truth, we can illuminate this darkness." "Together," Mike bellowed, the words fueling their resolve as if rehearsed. They formed a circle, each linked by their shared fears and hopes. They closed their eyes, feeling the vibrations of the darkness around them, the whispers, the tendrils curling around their thoughts, but halted by a burgeoning light emanating from their hearts. "I let them down," Mike confessed, his voice clear and firm. "I carry the weight of every life lost on my shoulders. But I won't let fear dictate my future." Each confession carved a path through the darkness, a beam of light cutting through fog. Anderson stepped closer. "I feared losing my brother, losing everything I hold dear. But I realize now, I have to forgive myself for things beyond my control." Smith swallowed hard, opting not to shy away from his demons any longer. "And I feared my own weakness. But I refuse to hide behind that fear anymore. I choose to fight, for my brothers and for myself." The shadows recoiled, shrieking in fury, unable to grasp the unfolding revelation. The light surged brighter, empowered by their honesty, pushing back against the darkness. With every truth spoken, The shadows withered, the malicious whispers fading into a distant echo. "Keep going," Mike urged as he felt a rush of energy reclaiming their place in the battlefield of shadows. "I killed to survive," Anderson shouted, "but I want to honor the lives I took. No more hiding behind guilt. No more shadows. I didn't have the strength when I should have," Mike barked. "But I'm here to protect my brothers now." The ground trembled violently, the shadows swirling like a wounded beast, ready to lash out. But with each powerful admission, each collective story woven together with threads of shared pain and truth, the ground beneath them shifted. They felt the foundation of darkness begin to crumble. The spirit of the tortured soldier flickered in and out of view, tethered to their emerging light. "Release us, face the truth, only then will we all be free. We will." Smith's voice rang, unwavering. "We will find our peace." With a collective inhale, the soldier breathed in victory, and they shouted their affirmations into the abyss. "We are not our mistakes." Then, a pulse ignited, the light exploded from their hearts, illuminating the darkness in radiant waves. All around them, the shadows shrieked and wriggled, their essence dissolving into mere wisps. Cold dread that had bound them for so long dissipated, replaced by warmth and the promise of unity, and in that blinding brilliance, they caught glimpses of their fallen comrades, eyes bright with gratitude, free at last from the oppressive darkness that had chained them. As the shadows broke apart, a final cacophony of rage erupted, but the strength of the trio standing together surpassed any malevolent force. With one last surge, Mike plunged his hand into the heart of the darkness. It shattered like glass, shards of shadow evaporating into the ether. Together, they shouted again, standing firm against the remnants of despair. And then it was over. Silence fell like a blanket, wrapping around them in a tender embrace. They gasped for breath, surveying the barren landscape. The insidious shadows had retreated, banished to the dark corners of their pasts. The sun began to rise, casting golden rays across the expanse. They stood together, side by side, in the light of a new day. "Did we really survive?" Smith whispered, awe dancing in his voice. Mike glanced at his comrades, relief washing over him. "Yes, and we will remember. The truth is our power." With hearts lighter than before and a bond forged in turmoil, they walked away from Fort Lost, leaving the darkness behind them, ready to face the world anew as they stepped into the dawn. Hope fluttered in their chests, beating strong. They had faced their fears and emerged victors. Now, as they looked ahead, something remarkable awaited, but in this moment, it was time for you to join in the journey. You need to subscribe now to keep your soul fed with these stories. Smash the like button now to feed that algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support means everything. Let us keep this community alive together.